Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasting.
Just a quick heads up before we begin. This episode was recorded remotely and we had a few connection issues that caused some delays. If it sounds like we're interrupting or accidentally talking over our guest, please know that wasn't our intention.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 39 of Stop Who Does That. I'm your host, Jackie.
And I'm your host, Jenna.
And we're hoping you're having a great week. Today's episode is a very special episode. It is actually part 3 of the main line murders. Through social media, we were able to connect with Lisa Kelso, who is the stepsister of Susan Reinert's children, Michael and Karen. Lisa has not been heard from before. Today, we are giving her our platform to give her a voice so she can share some information about Michael and Karen, who we often have said they get lost in all of this. They get forgotten about, and we want to keep their memory alive. And hopefully, Lisa, being here today, she can help bring them alive for us. Welcome to the show, Lisa.
Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you.
We are so excited to talk to you today and hear a little bit about how Susan's murder has affected your family and your life growing up with Michael and Karen. So if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about your mom and your life and how Ken kind of came into your mom's life and how you got to be step siblings with Michael and Karen.
Okay. Well, my mother had divorced when I was very young. And when she started working in Philadelphia, her boss, Ken Reinert, and she ended up dating and falling in love and getting married. I remember the first time I met him was in my grandmother's kitchen. He corrected me and said, "Don't you want to have dinner before you eat dessert?" And I just said, "Nope. My grandmother said I could have this before dinner." And I walked away.
You're like, who are you?
Exactly. I must have been, gosh, at that time, about 5 or 6 years old. So, one of those. Then we had the wedding and Karen and Michael were there. I got to meet them. And then I guess Sue and my stepdad had 50-50 custody, but she kept them during the week so they could attend school and they stayed with us on the weekends.
Okay. So you lived with them. They lived with your mom and Ken on the weekends. And so we talked earlier that Michael was about a year older than you, and Karen was a few years older. So did you guys do typical sibling things together? Did you all get along, or were they did they have their own friend group?
No, they really didn't know anyone in Narberth. So Karen enjoyed being a big sister and being a teacher. She liked to play teacher, and then we'd be upstairs in the 3rd floor, and we'd read books, play Holly Hobby, dolls, things like that. Mike was definitely a boy's boy. My stepfather was very, very active. He was a carpenter. He was in the military, in the Air Force. We flew B-52 bombers. We were always outside. He had me doing Little League. He had Mike playing Cub Scout baseball. So very active, but we kind of kept the girl roles to the house and the boys went outside type of thing growing up. And Karen and I got along pretty well. Mike, he was a typical bratty big brother type of thing. And and there were the occasional nights where Karen would be crying and telling her dad, "Oh, Mom says you don't love us anymore," and things like that. And it was, I remember just listening and being like, well, that's kind of, I was too young to really comprehend too much about that, other than it was definitely hurting my stepdad and my mom hearing that. So
Yeah, and Ken seemed like such a good guy. And how was how was Susan with you and your mom? Was she friendly?
I would not say friendly. She was very clingy to my stepfather. She did not give us the time of day. She just every morning, noon, and night, she would call my stepdad, come over, I need help with this at the house. And my mother was gracious enough to say, no, it's okay. Go take care of what you need to take care of for her and the kids. And he'd come
Yeah.
back but it was trying, I guess, for
Yeah.
my
And
mother. She never said anything negative, but I could tell, it's kind of trying
oh,
Was
yeah.
in any relationship. But overall, we had a good
Oh,
dynamic in
yeah.
our house, and every
were the
Saturday was
requests
like a baseball game for the Cub Scouts type of thing for Michael. So
were the requests that Susan was asking of your stepdad, were they related to the children?
uh, examples that I heard later on, like, oh, I can't change a light bulb or things like that, or I don't understand
Oh,
my taxes and, silly stuff like that. But, you
oh,
know,
Yeah. So
it was more of an attention
anything to
grabber.
really probably get his attention.
Hmm.
Yes. Yeah.
gotcha.
And yeah, you had mentioned when we talked earlier about Susan and Bill, and that they allegedly were seeing each other while she was still married to Ken.
Yeah, from what I understand and what others had shared with Joe Wamba, among other authors, was that yes, during her marriage with my stepfather, she did cheat on my stepfather. She would meet Bradfield at Valley Forge Park for their secret rendezvous, which is when there was a photo found in his jail cell after he died. It was most likely one of the spots they must have met a lot. So the Polaroid that was found, because I actually ended up meeting the security guard that found
Yeah.
him in his cell and found the photograph. So it was, so there was a lot of pain on my stepdad's end, and then, but my mother made him very happy, and they had my little brother together, I guess, about a year before everything happened. So
Yeah.
it was his second chance at a happy
I know that's
family
just
life.
absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
He's
So that photo found in Bradfield's cell, it's from Valley Forge, you guys
There are
believe
markers
that it's from?
out there, so it was very similar to one. So once that photo was found, they did a full combing of Valley Forge Park, thinking maybe there might be some grave sites, but that wasn't the case.
That's what we thought.
Gotcha.
And in our research, that's the speculation of that Polaroid, was that it could have been where Michael and Karen were buried. But you said,
It could have been their secret rendezvous spot from years past,
Gotcha. What an odd thing to hold on to. But I guess for him, it's about the memories.
so that night that of the baseball game that Michael was playing in, you had mentioned that was not Susan's night to have the kids.
No, she dropped them off at the house. We had dinner and hopped in the truck and went over to the baseball game in South Ardmore Field. And Karen and my mother and I and my stepdad on the bleachers. Mike was out playing. It was getting dark, a little dark. And next thing you know, Karen jumped up and ran right across the field, grabbed Michael, and they ran off together to the other side. And my stepdad was like, "What's going on? Where are my kids going?" And then he looked across and said, "Oh, that's Susan over there. Why is she here?" And so, they took off. And this was before cell phones. So we hopped in the truck and drove right
Wow.
home, and he tried calling her and couldn't get hold of anyone. And that was the last night that we ever saw them.
It's just crazy because she just showed up and they went with her. And what's Ken gonna do? Stop them? That's just so sad because it wasn't her night to even have them.
Also, I'm just thinking emotionally, it's like that you guys didn't know that was the last time you'd ever see them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like your dad didn't even get a chance. Did he even get a chance to hug them, or
No. He
he
started
did?
running across the field trying to catch, but she pulled out before he got there. So, yep.
That's
Wow.
so
So
heartbreaking. Yeah.
it's kind of interesting that they knew to just run to her car and leave. I mean, I get they saw their mom pull up,
Well,
but
Karen saw her mom, and I
it's
guess
almost like they were aware she was
no,
coming.
no, they weren't. But from what I understand, Sue waved to Karen, and Karen just ran right across the field, grabbed Mike on the way with his glove, and took off. So all unexpected.
Wow.
Nothing pre-planned.
Yeah. And then the next day, or I guess that was Friday. So it was the next day, Saturday or Sunday, when they found Susan.
Mm-hmm.
You had said that they called Ken to identify her body.
Yeah. I was home with my mother, and my stepfather had gotten a phone call at work to come to Harrisburg because they believed they found his ex-wife murdered outside of Harrisburg. So he let my mother know, and he went out there. And then he made a call before he left Harrisburg and let my mom know that nobody knew where Karen and Michael were. So he got back, tried calling his parents, who, we always went Sundays to his parents' place in Phoenixville, and nobody could find them. Nobody knew where they were.
Yeah, I can't imagine how he would have felt, first of all, having to identify Susan, and then second of all, his kids that are supposed to be with her are nowhere to be found. I just can't imagine the just agony he was going through.
I know, and we even said this in the
It was
podcast
definitely
that like we feel like
challenging
he gets
for
forgotten
him.
about because to think, to think of the terror he went through showing up, identifying his ex-wife's body, and knowing she took the kids unannounced. And I would assume over the weekend he was trying to call her
Mhm.
multiple times to find out where they went. Did he keep calling?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So not getting any
I think he even drove by there.
Yeah, and then you find out your kids are nowhere to be found.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was tough. It was more tough
I
because
can't imagine.
once it was reported to the news, just news reporters upon news reporters would show up at our front door. And I remember our doorbell ringing, and my stepdad's like, "Don't answer it." And I'd open the door, and there are all these flashes and news people right there on our front walkway. And I'm like, "Ooh." So we went back inside, and that was when it all began for our family. So
And-
my mother,
Yeah,
she
over
was devastated as well. There was just no consoling my stepfather.
No, I'm sure he was never the same person ever again.
Yeah.
You said you were 8 at the time?
In 79, when it happened, I was a little over 8 years old. And I just remember a lot of times my grandmother would come over and babysit my brother and I so that my stepdad could go out and do whatever they needed him to do. And my mother was always by his side, accompanying him and assisting wherever she could. So you really don't understand everything except that, here something really bad happened. And then, your playmates on the weekends are gone after a few years of being family. So it was a transition for all of us. It was, I remember them talking about how.
Did it make you feel scared?
You know what? That didn't cross my mind. It really didn't. It was just like, well, how can we find them? It was more of a, well, okay, they found her, but they weren't found. How can we find them? And the news reported, I remember them dredging every lake, every river, the Delaware River, Schuylkill River, from here all the way out to Harrisburg looking for their bodies. That was back when the milk carton missing children photos were still on the milk cartons. And so that went out across the nation. There was a lot of child trafficking. So that was something explored. Like, could they have been trafficked to another country or down to Mexico or something like that? Would we ever be able to find them again if it was? I know that at one point there's a place called the Dump where you just would back up to this dump in Montgomery County and dump all of your stuff out the back of your car. And they found Karen's sneaker in the dump. It had her DNA. So, and then, as the case evolved, finally there were suspects because Susan was secretly engaged to William Bradfield, and she had just recently taken out a life insurance policy, leaving him the sole heir of her insurance policy and custody of the kids, which was very odd because, there's no way he would get custody if my stepdad was still alive. So it was very odd.
Yeah. Susan seemed easily manipulated and very attention seeking with how she was with Ken and with Bill. It almost seems like any idea Bill came up with, she was just like like blind to the reality of what she was doing.
Yeah, I guess we would never really know the true dynamic. I think I've never read fully through Joe Wamba's book, but he was with our family on numerous occasions, interviewing, getting all the details, interviewing everyone he could find. He was a retired cop, so he knew how to investigate things pretty well. And, there were some love letters and some pretty gross letters that as soon as I started reading those, I was like, I'm not going to read the rest of this book because I guess his writing can be a little crass. So there was a lot of serious emotional.
Yeah, nobody needs to know. Nobody wants to hear
No.
that.
No.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I guess around the same time, it was noted that the principal, Jay
Interesting.
Smith's daughter and son-in-law went missing, and they vanished as well, never to be found again.
Yes.
So I think when the FBI and everybody got involved, they started researching that. Just like, well, what happened? He has his own daughter and son-in-law missing, and then
It does make you think that they may have disappeared. Did they disappear in the same manner that Karen and Michael did? Now that we know Jay is connected to 4 missing people, was he using the same method,
from what I understand,
all over again on Karen and
Right.
Michael?
From-
Makes you wonder.
Well, from what I understand, and I know my half-sister from my dad's first marriage was attending school at that time, and, there were a lot of drugs that were going around, and I guess they would show up. His daughter and son-in-law would show up for money all the time at the high school. So from what I was told, everything is secondhand, obviously, because I was young when it happened, but, hearing the stories and people trying to piece things together and, having the investigators, the detectives, the police, the FBI agents, all giving us input from all the different things that they were trying to find out kind of leads us to different conclusions than maybe the public eye.
What do you believe happened? Do you feel Bill was the one who executed these murders? Do you think it was Jay?
That's a loaded question. For quite a while, we believed what William Bradfield said in prison to his cellmate. He said that the children were drugged, I guess suffocated, and killed, cut up in pieces, dissolved in acid, and thrown in a dumpster at the high school. So I think that was kind of where we just stopped trying to guess anymore and said, well, maybe they'll turn up someday. Now, there was a lawyer that reached out to me who was in law school while this was going on. He attended every court case, and he explained to me that the timeline wouldn't have worked for them to be killed and cut up and dissolved in acid and dumped within the time frame that they went missing. What does correlate is of all the supposed witnesses and accomplices, because there were many teachers that knew about so-and-so is going to kill Susan, so-and-so is going to kill Susan. Well, okay, if you knew that somebody was going to harm Susan and there were 5 or 6 of you that knew it and not one of you said anything, why not? And everyone was accounted for except one woman who still teaches at Drexel University, from what I've been told. She agreed to testify if she could remain immune to any kind of accusations or court or jail or anything. And she's the only one that did not have an alibi. She also drove, from what I understand, down to Mexico. So she could have anywhere along the way, according to this lawyer, disposed of their bodies. So that's probably the most recent.
That makes sense because Jay was in jail. Jay was checking into jail. So there's no way that it was Jay who disposed of the bodies. It had to be this person.
That's one of the possibilities. There's never been an absolute answer. Someone showed up at my mother's door in Florida years back and said they're reopening the case, and they want the deputy, I guess, showed up and just said, we need to let you know they're reopening the case. So she called me, I called Harrisburg, and they said that they were hoping to get some DNA of my half-brother, my little brother, because he shares the same DNA as Karen and Michael. So I just haven't initiated going to Harrisburg yet. And I spoke with that one lawyer friend of ours that reached out and said, if I do that, maybe would he come with me? And my brother agreed to DNA samples and things like that. And that was probably a few years ago that they told us, but it's a super sensitive topic. My mother wants nothing to do with it anymore. She lived through it. They had us do a TV show in LA because of it. And every 2 years, it seems that it'll end up in the news or in the newspaper. And there are plenty of times over the years that I would start getting phone calls if my name was mentioned in the newspaper. I was after church one night on a Wednesday night, I was 40 minutes from home and I hopped on 476 and a car started following me. It was probably 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And the car almost rear-ended me and then went around me and sped off. And I was one of the only cars on the road. And so I got closer to my exit and all of a sudden headlights shined right in my eyes. The car had turned around and was facing me and started coming toward me. And I swerved and they swerved right before they impacted. And and then they turned around and started chasing me. And I was like, all right, let me start praying now. I said, all right, God, if my life is in trouble, you're in danger, let there be a policeman at the intersection when I get off at my exit. So I stayed in the inside lane until the very last second to go over the median to get off at my exit. And that car went right over the median, followed me, and I got up to the light and the car was right behind me. And there was a big suburban police truck to the right at the light. And I started screaming my head off and pointing to the car behind me. The car behind me backed up and then went straight across the bridge. And I just pulled in the parking lot where the police were near and they chased the car. And then I guess I waited about 20 minutes and went over the bridge. And mind you, it was probably 10 o'clock at this point. And they had pulled the car over and there was a really old guy driving and two younger boys in the car. And I just drove by carefully. And then I proceeded to go home and hide my car in the back parking lot, back part of the driveway. So nobody knew where I lived. So every time it's in the media, something will happen, either crank phone calls or people showing up at my job, just.
Oh, that's
And
terrifying.
I guess
And
it doesn't faze me as much because when I was aware.
in addition to that car chase that you just described, you had mentioned to me about Bradfield making kidnapping attempts on you.
Yeah, I was first grade and I remember we lived half a block from school in Narberth. So, walking to school every day was no big deal. My mother would watch me get there. And after school, we were let out like 2 minutes early one day and ran the half block down to my girlfriend's house and we're out back her yard. And all of a sudden she grabbed me and said, oh my gosh, get down now. And she threw me down behind a bush. And I'm like, what are you doing? She covered my mouth and said, shh, that's the guy trying to kidnap you. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I remember looking and seeing, like, it looked like a homeless bum, super tall, long beard, like brown, scraggly. He had like an Abe Lincoln hat on and a tail tuxedo, like really dirty. And I just remember.
Terrifying.
And so I remember him going, like, halfway up the block, going to the school. He's looking at his watch and then he's picked up his pace. And I didn't have a clue somebody was looking for me. I found out later, like, my friend's mom called my mother and they came down and got me. And then the detectives had to pretty much make sure that, somebody was watching out for me going to and from school, even though it was a half block. So I had no clue. According to someone else, one of the teachers, he had grabbed another girl named Lisa one day and learned it wasn't the right Lisa and like let her go.
Wow.
So I guess it was probably about a week or two later, or maybe a little longer than that. That's when they showed Bradfield on the news. And we were all watching. And I said, that's the guy that was going up to the school to kidnap me, according to so-and-so. And they said, what? I'm like, yeah, that's exactly who it was. And it was Bradfield.
Was this during the estate dispute?
This was during the dispute over whether or not he would get, actually, it was post decision for the life insurance policy.
Gotcha.
He had been found as suspicious and a suspect. So the insurance money was temporarily being split between Sue Reinert's brother and my stepfather. In
Okay.
the agreement, they would hold each other's money until the kids have been found, or if they were never found, then they would give the money back to each other. It was something
Yeah.
we weren't involved in the details of that, so I'm not sure exactly how that worked. But so I remember seeing him, and so ever since first grade, I had to go to the detectives. They would teach me, okay, because in middle school, you took a bus, but in high school, you walked everywhere if you weren't too far from school. So they're like, all right, if you walk to school this way, don't walk home that way. If you walk to school this direction, go a different direction each day. Don't go home the same way you came each day. Become unpredictable so nobody can plan a kidnapping. So that was pretty much how I was raised. And then I guess it was a few years ago, one of my best friends in homeroom apologized to me. She found me on Facebook and apologized. What are you apologizing? She's like, oh my gosh, you were like the sweetest person. You were my favorite friend. But because of the murders, my mom wouldn't let me come play with you after school so I
You were like
was
a
not a very social person. I was very quiet because when you have to grow up that way real quick, nobody your own age is going to understand
No.
what's going
No, they
on.
don't.
So it was a little awkward, but and then the people in Narberth, we all just grew up together. So they knew stuff would happen, but it didn't affect their friendship with me. They're like, yeah, I know, but it was just
That's
you.
hard.
So yeah. So, I mean, as victims of the family, I mean, my mother was, judged and treated, disdainly at times. Sue
I
Reinert was not a very nice person to us. And, and to tell her kids that her father didn't love them anymore because he remarried my mother was
right.
hard. It was hard on the kids. So, I don't want to speak ill of the dead. But nobody deserved what she got. As a matter of fact, I was going to go visit Valley Forge Park today to visit my step grandparents, my stepfather, who are buried behind the chapel.
Mhm.
And Susan and Karen and Michael's names are carved in the bell tower there.
Mhm.
So there will be a permanent memorial for them.
That's nice. That's really nice.
I've been there
Yeah.
before. I didn't know
Yeah.
that. I'll have to
Yeah,
look
I
for
love
Okay.
Valley Forge Park.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful, very peaceful, and it's really nice there. Yeah, I think a lot of times, like, there's so many more victims than just Susan and the children. I mean, it was Ken, it was you, your mom, and your little brother. You're all
Mhm.
victims. It affected each one of your lives forever. Like, you're still saying, even today, people every couple years, coming
Mhm.
to ask questions or coming to your place of employment, and it's like, you guys never asked for any of this and have had to deal with so much, from such a young age. I just can't imagine. And
Yeah. I think what happens is, like, I have some very close friends from high school who will always be like a big brother, big sister. And when they catch wind of something about the murders, they send links directly to me,
Mhm.
like Netflix. Okay, well, Netflix chose a writer. I reached out to Netflix. I reached out to the writer's office. Nobody's gotten back. A talk show host, a morning woman's talk show host, was going to do a show on them. And she must have read the one book written by the woman who had a crush on Bradfield
Ugh.
because she was speaking ill of Susan Reinert. And, it was very disheartening to try to get hold of people before they go on the air about things to say, hey, we're family. We lived it. We're still alive.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to look for royalties or anything, but if you want the truth, why don't you talk to the sources?
Yes, you're still here. You're still, trying to
Mm-hmm.
have a life. And I feel like, yeah, a lot of people don't realize that,
Yeah.
And your brother had, Ken wasn't the man he was when your mom met him, and your brother really had to grow up like that's unfair to him too.
Yeah,
My
does your
brother missed out. My brother missed out on a genuine childhood with his father because my stepfather shut down. He could not function well. The few years that they were still around, he taught me a lot of different things, but he just wouldn't. He just didn't want to see my brother leave his side. All the insecurities you could imagine.
Yeah.
You know,
So sad.
So, but each one of us has our own burdens. We have our own challenges,
Mhm.
and those are the things that develop our character and help us to be able to reach out and help other people that
Well said.
going
Yep.
through hardships.
Mhm.
So by the time they flew us to LA for a TV show, I don't know, 13 years ago, you know, we were resolved. We could talk about things. We could not get choked up. We could not get, once you've really worked it in your heart, like, okay, this happened. Yes, it was horrible. Yes, we lived it, but it can't define us other than the basic victim stuff. Like, I wanted to be a teacher. I was told I couldn't get a job teaching in the tri-state area because of the murders. I had someone in Harrisburg verify that, said, yep, because that was back in the late 80s, early 90s when all of the shootings started happening, when people would go into the schools and shoot teachers.
Oh, yeah.
So I lost my ability to teach. So, but you just kind of roll with the punches like, all right, well, then what are we going to do? Okay. Just so, my mother has moved on. She's doing very well. My brother, he's doing well himself, pursuing his own dreams and desires. And I recently had gotten married. I guess not so recently. So, it adds a new twist to life. And, but really it's just for Karen and Michael, I'm grateful that they and Susan are memorialized. Unless somebody tears that bell tower down at Valley Forge, they will always be in the chapel. And my stepfather and grandparents are right behind the chapel, all the family as close together as you could be.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. And then how would you want the public to remember Michael and Karen? Because, when we tell this story, we're trying to keep their memories alive because there's so many people in this area that had never heard of this. How would you like them remembered? And like, if you can just share like one memory that you have with them that brings a smile to your face.
it's so hard to have like one or two memories from so long ago. I think, Karen had the desire to want to be a teacher like her mom. We were always playing school. We were decorating Barbie hair dolls and things like that. She had the desire to do something, and she always tried to be the big sister, teach me something as I was quite a few years younger. I remember when my little brother was brought home from the hospital and Karen and Michael were brought over, and the fact that Michael was able to hold my brother and just, how that really started bonding our family together more and more. So, it's just, they didn't deserve what they got. Nobody does. But to keep their memory alive, visit Valley Forge Park, read Joe Wambaugh's book. Don't read Loretta Switzer novels because she had a crush on Bradfield. Recently Joe Wambaugh passed away in the past year and a half. So, he had asked me to write a book about our family side of, perspective of the murders. And I did start it, and I think someone accidentally threw it away. I had probably about 40 pages written, but I was a teenager, and it was just something that I don't think my stepfather and my mother were ready to even hear about. So it's just, my desire would be, if people want to do movies, if people want to do TV shows, talk to us, talk to the family, get the real scoop. You're the first two that have actually asked for and no one knew about the attempted kidnapping. We still don't know, honestly, what happened to Karen and Michael. The suspicions lie with the one woman who didn't have an alibi and drove to Mexico, but nothing can be proven. So, and she's a successful architect at Drexel, and, good for her. But I think, I think Karen and Michael were two kids doing the best they could in sports and activities, and, just like every other boy and girl growing up.
It's so
Well said.
terrible. It is
Yeah.
so terrible to think that I mean, Bradfield, I don't know how this man had such a hold on women. I mean, I can't wrap my head around it. And then to think like he is the reason Michael and Karen aren't here is horrific. And it makes me so mad. And then to think that Jay Smith got to walk free eventually and go on and live his life. Meanwhile, we have two children that had their whole future robbed of them. It's
the worst part of the whole story is
thing.
the
Yeah.
children. And I think everyone can agree everyone who listens to the episode or the books, it's the children, and that's what's the most heartbreaking. We have kids, and it's,
Yeah.
they're just innocent, like you said, just doing everyday activities just like every other child
Mm-hmm.
back then and today. And just the most heartbreaking part of the story, I think.
Yeah,
But
and little did they know this web of lies and deceit and fraud was going on with their mother's own coworkers. I mean, these people were around children. Like, I
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm sure you listened to our episode, but I said I'm like, these people taught my dad. Like, they were around minors and they're concocting this web with their own coworker who was a single mother. I mean, how can you prey on somebody like that? It's just mind blowing.
Yeah. Well, in the 70s, people got away with a lot of things.
Yep.
yeah.
That's why a lot of cold cases have been reopened now that we have the DNA and
Mm-hmm.
have the ability to the science to be able to track things down. And,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully I will be able to get to Harrisburg sometime soon with my
Mm-hmm.
brother's
Yeah.
DNA and find out if they have it open still and talk to the investigators, see the evidence that they've now located and see, both people are now gone.
Mm-hmm.
Jay Smith passed away
Mm-hmm.
years back, and William Bradfield died on my stepfather's birthday. My stepfather said that was the best birthday gift he could have ever gotten.
I remember that when
Absolutely.
we covered it, when we researched
Mhm.
it,
Yeah.
Jackie and I said, how
Mhm.
profound.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's, I don't mean to get religious, but I think that's God's way of saying, like, this was the right guy and this is the guy who did it. And it was almost like, saying to your dad, like, this is payback almost, and very poetic in a way. My heart goes out to your family, and I can see how this has affected you too, leaving you in the wake. I mean, you had these step siblings one day, and the next, they're just gone, and
Mhm.
them again. Now, I meant to ask earlier, I think the connection cut out, but your younger brother, does he have any memory of Michael and Karen?
He doesn't really know. He's only a year old.
Oh.
So, like I said, I mean, there's some photos that my mother has of Michael holding and,
Yeah.
just, it just, she's got a whole collection of everything, all the memories. And it's something that, you know, we keep in a cedar cabinet. We don't open it. It's something that happened. She had to live through it. She had to go to the court cases. The challenge was, did my stepfather want the death penalty for them or life in prison? So that really opened an eye up to, gosh, I mean, obviously when you're a parent, yeah, you wish the murderers to be taken.
Mhm.
And the fact that Smith was let go due to misplaced evidence and never to be tried for the same case again. And then he would start communicating through the media back and forth because I remember when he was released, I got a phone call at work and I just, I was very
From him.
taken by surprise. Not from him, no, a news reporter. And,
Okay.
I shared some things and then the next week or so, Smith had shared a message back to me in the newspaper and it was just eerie. It's just, and part of me wonders like, the children of these two men, could those have been the boys in the car that night? You don't know, but you just like I trust God. If it was my time, it was my time, you know.
Mhm.
But like I said, everything we all go through in life, as
Mhm.
good, bad, and ugly as it is, it's an opportunity once we can get through it
Mhm.
to be able to help others learn to cope, deal, and overcome the grief, the anger, the distrust, the fears, things like that. And that's really, our family at this point, we're at peace. And if
Mhm.
there's someone that needs help getting through things, we're here. We're here for someone to reach out to, no matter what.
I love that. That's great. And
Oh.
that's such a good way to turn your life into good, despite everything that's happened to you and your mom and your brother, just to turn it into something good. And you,
Mhm.
I'm sure all of our listeners are just really going to appreciate to hear the truth from you today, Lisa. So we thank you again so much for meeting with us and giving us the opportunity to share your truth, really.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And we do have another victim's family that we're working with. And then we have a few more that have reached out to us asking us, hey, can you do a spotlight on my son or my sister? And they want to come on and they want to talk about them. And we're relatively new to this. We started our podcast in November. So it is a little intimidating at times to be like, do I reach out to people's family? How do I even do it? And we're so glad you found us because we weren't even sure how to go about it to talk to family members. But go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the fact that, I think we're still one of the top 10 unsolved murder cases in the whole history of the nation.
Oh, wow.
I think we were at 7 a few years back. And when something has happened to you, like the movie that came out, the miniseries movie, I was like, why is my stepdad in like a station wagon? He had a Bronco.
Right.
We were not uncool people, Like
Right.
you get indignant on certain things. They just trip you up. And I think that hearing the female talk show host that did an episode about the murders, she was not kind and she was not on target with fact. That is truth. Probably, like I said, only what she might have read from one of those books written later on. And so I think as soon as my friend will catch wind of something, it depends on the victims, but it's been so long that we just get indignant sometimes. Like, this is not the truth. There are quite a few details that are correct, but there are a lot of pieces missing. There's a lot of holes in the stories. And there's more that I am not legally able to share on this.
Yeah.
Names, places, predictions, Harrisburg stuff. But, it's just that some of the families, you may want to just say, I know that you went through a hardship. A lot of Hollywood right now is trying to reach out and do shows on the victims' perspectives on things, which ironically, if that's what's going on, like Netflix, they didn't reach out to the victims, but they were trying to write something that I haven't heard anything published. But, I think the best approach is just say, hey, if someone comes to you and said, do something on my child, or I would say, how is that going to help them be resolved in their heart? Or is this going to be a public plea in some way, shape, or form? You have to make sure that they can talk through things and they will not lash out. It's hard not to tear up, but you just have to make sure the motives are correct and you have to be real gentle and to say, is this something that they're willing to do or want to do? Because like I said, my mother really, when we had an opportunity before, she didn't want anything to do with it. When that deputy showed up at her house, she's like, you call, I'm not calling, I'm not getting involved. I don't want to be reminded anymore. So it's really, doing some research on your own, gently reaching out, asking people, is this something, do they want their voices heard? And making sure that it's not going to be a bashing or, vindictive perspective for them, to make sure they're resolved enough to be able to talk through things in an honest way. So that's just my 2-bit input on that.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
For your input on that. And for anyone else listening that interacts with victims' families or other podcasters, it's definitely great advice. And we'll definitely stay in touch with you and get your input as well as we work through future cases and talk to other families. You can help us kind of navigate that process.
Okay. And if there's anyone that has questions, you can send them to me and I'll do my best.
Yeah,
absolutely.
With what we got. All right, ladies. Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure. And thank you for your time and for speaking with us today.
Thank you.
Care.